What's up, humble farmers? Taiki here. So today I want to tell you a little trick that the financial media uses to lie directly to your face with zero repercussions. So, this trick is actually really smart, and it's called the 40% rule. And the Wall Street Journal actually has a pretty good article on it, and it kind of highlights how if there's like a financial pundit or some analyst, and they have zero idea what the fuck is going on, they'll just say that there's like a 40% chance of something happening. For example, let's say you ask someone, what's the probability of a recession this year? Actually, the correct answer, right, in game theory terms, is for them to say 40%. Because if the recession actually happens, they can say, I told you there was a pretty moderately high chance of it happening, right? I said 40%. But if the recession doesn't happen, they can say, I did say it's under 50% chance of it happening, right? So 40% is actually like the perfect answer to give if you don't actually have a strong opinion. And you see this all the time. Even earlier this year, in May, right? Fearmongering put out this article about how they're lowering the recession probability in 2025 from 60% to 40%. What the fuck does that even mean, right? Like that doesn't tell us anything, right? The Trump tariffs caused the markets to go down, and so they said, there's a 60% chance of it happening, and then the markets started pumping, so they're saying 40%. They don't know jack shit, right? And also, right, it's like, how can you blame them? Because the markets are really hard. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen. There's a reason why most people lose money in markets, right? It's really hard to beat the markets. So, I mean, if you work for like a firm and you want to keep your job, you don't want to say outlandish things, or you don't want to say, you don't want to go out on a limb and say there's like an 80% chance of recession, 90% chance of recession, because if you're wrong, then it just makes you look bad. But if you just stay in the range of 40 to 60%, then you just get to keep your job. So next time, someone asks me the question of something happening, and I don't know what the fuck the answer is, I'm just gonna say, given my work, I think there's a 40% chance, because then it just makes me sound pretty smart, right? I think financial media, they're in the business of sounding smart and to cover their ass instead of actually making predictions. So that's, I just thought that was funny. And another thing I really hate about media is this constant fear-mongering of how a collapse is imminent or something, right? Because, if you're like a Bloomberg, they're incentivized to say that there's a 100% chance of a recession, which they called for in 2022 when inflation was running super hot. And yes, technically we did have 2 negative quarters of GDP growth, but the National Bureau of Economic Research, who is the official arbiter of whether a recession happens or not, did not call for, or they didn't declare a recession. So there was a 100% chance something happening, but it didn't happen? What the fuck, right? And one example I like to think about is Nouriel Roubini, right? They're this perma bear, right? And it always bothers me because whenever Roubini goes on TV, these videos gets hundreds and thousands of views. And if you think about his track record, he called for the 2009 financial crisis. Good for him. But for the past 16 years, he's been calling for a crash every single year, and he's always been wrong. So this guy's been right one time, and then now he gets to just live off of that one call. And if you actually study how he makes money, right, he's an advisor for a bunch of colleges and other economic bullshit, right? And he always goes on these conferences, right? He just says how the world is in danger of it's imminent, the collapse is imminent, and then it's how much does he charge to talk at his conferences? 50 to 100K, right? So what is his business model, right? He just built his brand as this perma bear, and he just he just monetizes on that. So good for him, honestly, right? That's a great business model, right? If people eat it up, then good for him. But you have to understand, he knows what he's doing, right? He knows what he's doing. And I'm sure he believes everything he's saying as well. But it's not this guy's right. It's just more so, okay, if you want to hear the bear take, you just pay this guy and then people come to your conference, right? And I'm sure you've heard of Jim Cramer, right? The guy from CNBC. And there's this reverse Cramer index where if you just counter trade Jim Cramer and what he says on television, you end up making a bunch of money. And it's really easy to troll Jim Cramer, but I also kind of sympathize with him because, he actually used to be a really good hedge fund manager when he actually had a fund. And if you think about what he does now, every day he's forced to go on TV for 30 minutes and then give his takes on the market, right? And answer 5 questions from retail investors. Imagine you were forced to go on TV 30 minutes a day and give your take on whatever topic, right? That people want answers on. You're bound to say some dumb shit. So, you know, it's actually called like this Cramer effect, where if you're forced to answer questions every single day for like why something happened in the markets, then you're just gonna sound like dumb like most of the time, because at the end of the day, like no one knows what makes markets move. No one really knows what's happening, right? Like it's like we're just guessing. And of course, there's alpha, there's edge to be had if you put in the work. But like if you take short-term moves in the markets, like no one really knows. Like it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. There's actually this very interesting study done by Philip Tetlock in the 1990s and the 2000s, where he took 284 people that made a living forecasting political and economic trends, and he tracked them for decades. And you know, these people had PhDs, they had decades of experience on Wall Street, politics, etc. So they should be the experts, right? And I think over 2 decades, he collected 82,361 predictions from these experts around markets and geopolitics. And it turns out that, you know, their predictions were worse off than if they were to like just do a coin flip. So it was like under 50%, which is kind of funny, right? And it's not that these people are stupid, right? These people are clearly very, very smart. But people are just really, really bad at predicting future events. So what's the takeaway here, right? I think the main takeaway here is that no one really knows anything, right? Experts can't predict the future. I can't predict the future. You can't predict the future. And humans love looking for patterns where there aren't any. And this example I want to give is there was like this one time this scientist, he took these 2 buttons, right? One button would flash green 80% of the time, and then the other button would flash red 20% of the time. And the goal was to push on the button before they flash and get the right answer. So they did this experiment with rats and humans, and for the rats, if they guessed correctly, they would get food, and if they guessed wrong, they would get like a mild electric shock. And you know, once the rats played this game enough times, they realized that, well, like, you know, like most of the time it flashes green and they get food, so they would just press green or press on a button that represents green like 100% of the time, right? And they kind of just, you know, embrace the fact that, well, like for like 80% of the time we get food, 20% of the time I get shocked, but fuck it. Like the rats just pressed the single button because they figured that was like the most optimal strategy. And then, you know, over a long enough sample size, the rats guessed correct roughly 80% of the time, which makes sense. But for humans, guess what they scored? They actually scored 68% of the time. And that's because, I mean, the humans, like, we know the rules, right? We know that this button will flash green 80% of the time. But the humans tried to outsmart the system, right? Maybe they would press the green button 3 times, and then on the 4th time, it's like, well, like, maybe this time it'll be red, so that they would press red, right? So, you know, I mean, maybe the optimal strategy was to only press green, but humans, they just like wanted to press red, right? They wanted to feel right. They wanted to be contrarian. They thought they could predict when the red would flash, even though it was completely random. I can only speak for myself, but I mean, when I first got started in markets, I didn't really have original thought, right? Like I would kind of outsource my thinking to other people, partly because I didn't know any better, but you know, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to other people, right? I think it's good to listen to other opinions and then have it form your own market views and whatnot. But if you fully internalize that no one knows anything, I think it's kind of empowering, right? Because, well, yeah, like no one knows anything. Therefore, I have to take responsibility for my own actions. I have to form my own thought. And I think the best way to do this is not by just like not listening to the people or like just being in this own echo chamber of yours, but I'm sure if you're watching this, you know, you have like a bunch of trades, right? Like I highly suggest you look at your past trade history and ask yourself, what types of trades did I make the most amount of money on, and what types of trades did I lose the most amount of money on? And for me, right, where I would lose the most amount of money is when I would buy something because someone else said I should buy it, right? Because then I'm borrowing conviction. I don't know like why I'm buying it, but you know, I see it on Twitter, I see it on YouTube, therefore I buy, right? And then I lose a bunch of money, or I like just buy like meme coins, right? And then I just like get utterly rinsed. It's kind of fun, right? Buying hype stuff, but yeah, I lose money. But then where I would make the most money is when I would like just hyper focus on fundamentally based tokens in DeFi, and I would not like take other people's opinions, right? I would just like form like some conclusion that I reached over months of research and be like, you know what, like I think I'm right. And then I would just like bet big on that, and then I just like make a bunch of money, right? So it turns out, wait, like I make a bunch of money when I don't listen to other people, and I lose a bunch of money when I do listen to people. And also, right, on the topic of like listening to other people, maybe it's not that you listen to other people, but maybe, you know, you like, it's like this form of like confirmation bias where if you buy a token, then you're only going to look for reasons to be bullish that token, right? Because I mean, if you're bullish, like whatever token, right, you don't want to hear like a bear case for the token, right? Like, that's not fun. Like you only want to hear people that's like saying good things about it, and then you kind of get into this loop of like, oh well, like yeah, like of course I need to be bullish because all these other people are bullish, but it turns out like you only look for people that are bullish. So maybe yeah, like it's not a good way to go about it. So yeah, it takes humility, right? Like it takes humility to say that, well, no one knows anything, so I'm just gonna have strong opinions loosely held. And also, like on the topic of losing a bunch of money on tokens, another way I lose a bunch of money is like when I get way too attached, like emotionally attached to like a token, like an idea or a concept, in a community or whatever, right? That's when I just become a bag holder and I join the community, and then I turn like a short-term trade into like a longer-term investment. This might be a cynical take, but I've noticed a trend where a lot of successful traders that I know tend to be really, really cynical, right? And maybe it's because they've seen so many pumps and dumps and so many bear markets, but like they kind of view all these tokens as a vehicle to extract money, like it's like make money from, right? Make money and leave, right? And I think that's kind of good because, I mean, yes, like maybe that's like a negative some way of thinking, but in order for you to protect yourself, right, like from like brutal drawdowns and like being way too optimistic, like a particular concept and like joining a community, right, and having this bag holder mentality, it's like, well, if all these tokens are just like a vehicle to make money from, it's like, why am I so emotionally attached to like anything, right? And that way you kind of have a more objective way of thinking about things. And I'm not saying it's bad to be emotionally attached to things, right? I mean, I love Bitcoin, right? I love Ethereum, and you know, there's like always an emotional attachment to crypto for me, right? So maybe there's like always gonna be some bias there, but for any like coin, right? It's like, yeah, like I buy, I sell, and I move on, right? It is what it is. That's all I, you know. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me, guys. Hopefully, you learned a few things. I think I rambled a bunch, but you know, maybe hopefully you took something positive away from it, right? That's kind of the goal of this channel, right? But anyways, thank you, humble farmers, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.